This is a chapter where Narada Muni comes and visits his disciple Vyāsadeva. Vyasadev's the dude that wrote all the Vedas.
Yes, I remember talking about him the last session we had. Yes.
Yeah, he's actually a literary incarnation of God. I mean, he knew what all the incarnations were before they appeared, and it's all written down. Like Buddha, 2,000 years before the Buddha came, he said, "Okay, here's the Buddha. He's the number whatever it is, and he's going to appear in this province in India. His name will be this. His father's name will be this." And then 427,000 years from now, after the age of Kali is over, the Kalki avatar will appear. But if your name's not in that book, if you think you're God, if you say you're God, you're actually a dog. God,
Yeah,
you're a
exactly.
dog.
Yeah.
That's what Prabhupada
But
said once. This one
Prabhupada
young
said,
man,
yeah.
was at a Pandal program, and Prabhupada was speaking. He stood up and he said, "I am God." He said, "No, you're not. You're a dog." But anyway, this I think we'll just do we'll take turns reading,
Sure.
but I'm going to just read the translation because it's just a waste of time otherwise.
No problem. Whatever you want to do.
Okay, so text 13. See, Vyāsadeva was let me give you a little backstory about this.
Sure.
He wrote all of the Vedas. He wrote the Upanishads, he wrote the Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yagra Veda, and Atharva Veda. And
Okay.
he did all these different things, and he wasn't feeling satisfied for some reason, even though, he was self-realized soul, obviously. But and he was wondering about this. And Narada Muni, this transcendental spaceman who was, one of the sons of Lord Brahma, actually he can go from any planet in the universe to any other place, even into the spiritual world, in no time flat.
Wow.
That he has that mystic ability. And so he appeared in his ashram and he said, "What's troubling you?" And, he actually asked him, Narada, the cause of his dissatisfaction. And he prescribed, he gave him the conclusion that you haven't glorified Krishna enough. You haven't really talked about the personality of Godhead enough.
Okay.
And, so do that. And then he wrote this Bhagavatam as a result.
Oh, okay.
So the Bhagavatam is it leads up to the pastimes of Krishna, which I'm reading right now. It's Prabhupada, when he first started, he took a bunch of these, the first canto, which we're reading right now. He published that in India. He bought the first 2 volumes of the first canto. It's a big book. It's like 18,000 verses, 17,000 verses, something like that.
Wow.
And it all has purports. And you have to show your bona fides if you're coming to America and you want to transplant a new culture, into the world, spread this knowledge. And so he brought these books, and that's all he had with him. When he went across the ocean in the Jaladuta, this steamship, he'd hitched a ride on a steam freighter. And he was 69 years old. He's even older than I am.
Yeah,
and that's old.
I was just watching some videos on Prabhupada.
Oh, really? Yeah. He had 2 heart attacks at sea. 2 heart attacks. And he came to New York, and he was living in the Bowery on 3rd Avenue, which is like he had like a little flat where he'd have to step over the bums. There's songs about the Bowery bums in New York City.
Oh, good.
And he had to, he got all his stuff taken. He was trying to still translate all these literatures, and he had a typewriter, and he got his typewriter stolen, and he didn't have any success for like a year. And he didn't even know, he didn't have the proper clothes or anything. He didn't know anybody. And one time it snowed in New York City. He's from India, right?
Yeah.
He looked out the window. He looked at the buildings. He said, "Someone has whitewashed." He didn't even see snow before, and so he was wondering what happened. But anyway, he I forgot my train of thought, but the the Krishna book, he actually, I remember now, he wanted to write this whole Bhagavatam, you know, and he was getting older. I mean, he was 69. I mean, he was older than I'm only 68. I'm like a fossil, and the fossil's about ready to become extinct.
Mm.
So, you know, he was really even older than I am. He wasn't in perfect health. And so, but he wanted to give the Bhagavatam, and especially the 10th canto. The 10th canto deals with Krishna's pastimes alone.
Okay.
And because he wanted to highlight that, he came out with a Krishna book, which is a summary of the 10th canto without all the purports and the verses and everything. It's just like a narrative, you know, and he was lacking the money to do that. And he asked one of his disciples, who was friends with George Harrison, the Beatle.
Yeah. That's
And
actually what I
you know,
was wondering. Yeah.
he asked him to drop his name and say, we need some help. You know, he would never ask, you know, any celebrity like that, but he knew George, and
Yeah.
he figured, you know, if he could help him. He had some back pay that was due for some Back to Godhead magazines that they were distributing like crazy back in 1970.
Okay.
And they needed to pay that off before they could pay this Krishna book. The pay for the printing of this Krishna book. Is a beautiful cover of this a big volume, 2-volume book, and it has all Krishna's pastimes, because he knew he might not finish the Bhagavatam, the 10th canto, and he was right, because he died right in the middle of the of working on that. But my spiritual master, I just found something. My spiritual master, Kirtanananda, he was he wrote a book called Heart of the Gita. It's in poetry. He took all the verses and made them into rhyming couplets, and so it's really a beautiful book. And he also, I didn't know this, but he also did that for the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, the Krishna book, the one that George Harrison, you know, paid for. He gave him like $18,000 for the printing. And it's funny the way it happened, because he was in George Harrison's friend's house, who was a sculptor outside of London, and you know, as the night was ending, you know, and everybody was getting ready to leave, and he hadn't asked George Harrison yet. He was like really nervous to do that, because you don't ask people for money, you know, especially rich people like that hounding him all the time, you know, because he's rich, he's famous. But you know, he told him about that, and he just said, you know, Prabhupada would like to like your help to, you know, to produce this book, you know. And at that point, there was a thunderstorm, and it was raining like crazy, and there was a big thunder crack, and lightning hit the house, and all the lights went out just when he said that.
Wow.
And then the lights were out for a moment, you know, like for a minute or so, and then they came back on again. And George Harrison was grinning from ear to ear. And he said, you know, I've heard of like signs and stuff like that, but this is obviously he paid for the book, you know, because like that was definitely some kind of like divine intervention, you know.
Wow, that's not. What did you say your spiritual master's name was? Kirtananda?
Kirtanananda. He was the first, actually, he was the first disciple of Prabhupada back in 1966. He's the first one to wear the dhoti. And, you know, he wanted to finish that book, the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that we're reading now. He was like at the 10th canto, and he wanted to finish it before he passed away. And so we're trying to find where they started building him a house. This is before I was there in the early 70s. He started building him a house in mid 70s or 73. I think they started the Palace of Gold.
Yeah. In West Virginia.
And they turned it into a fancy thing, and he never got to live in it. But that's why he wanted that place. He wanted to divest himself of the responsibility of maintaining the worldwide organization, you know.
Okay.
And so he wanted to sit and write, because that was his like meditation, you know, and he wanted to finish that book, because these books are like the background. They say that these books will exist in this world for the next 10,000 years. They'll be the law books for mankind.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so this is from the first canto. Prabhupada said, I've put everything into the first canto, because he didn't even know if he was going to live that long. That's why he made the 10th canto into a Krishna book, and made it like a beautiful pictures with all his disciples, were artists, and a lot of his disciples were artists, and put to get together this big, almost a coffee table sized book, beautiful 2-volume book of the 10th canto. But anyway, let's just get into this right now, because we're already wasted 20 minutes here.
Not a problem, brother.
So anyway, the translation is, you can read the first purport if you want to. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Sure.
This is Nārada Muni. He's talking to his disciple, Vyāsadeva. He says, "Oh, Vyāsadeva, your vision is completely perfect. Your good fame is spotless. You're firm in vow and situated in truthfulness. And thus you can think of the pastimes of the Lord in trance for the liberation of the people in general from all material bondage." You can read the first paragraph there.
Sure thing. People in general have a taste for literatures by instinct. They want to hear and read from the authorities something about the unknown, but their taste is exploited by unfortunate literatures, which are full of subject matter for satisfaction of the material senses. Such literatures contain different kinds of mundane poems and philosophical speculations, more or less under the influence of Maya, ending in sense gratification.
Maya would be the cave of Plato.
Yes, illusion. These literatures, although worthless in the true sense of the term, are variously decorated to attract the attention of the less intelligent men. Thus, the attracted living entities are more and more entangled in material bondage without hope of liberation for thousands and thousands of generations. Sri Nārada Rishi, being the best amongst the
Vaishnavas,
thank you, is compassionate towards such unfortunate victims of worthless literatures, and thus he advises Sri Vyāsadeva to compose transcendental literature, which is not only attractive, but can also actually bring liberation from all kinds of bondage. Srila Vyāsadeva or his representatives are qualified because they are rightly trained to see things in true perspective. Srila Vyāsadeva and his representatives are pure in thought due to their spiritual enlightenment, fixed in their vows due to their devotional service, and determined to deliver the fallen souls rotting in material activities. The fallen souls are very eager to receive novel informations every day, and the transcendentalists, like Vyāsadeva or Nārada, can supply such eager people in general with unlimited news from the spiritual world. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the material world is only a part of the whole creation, and that this earth is only a fragment of the whole material world.
Yeah, I mean, this literature has been around for 5,000 years, and all the saints and sages say that this is the best book in the world. And when, like everybody else is full, reading about, Taylor Swift, or, the latest thing in like how come Ken got an Oscar but not Barbie,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like all these things are like popular pop culture and stuff, right?
Yes.
So one spiritual master, he said, like, this is the way they consume these literatures.
Okay.
It's like you get up in the morning and you have liquid dirt in the form of coffee, and you smoke a cigarette, and you have like fried chicken embryos and pig guts for breakfast, and and then you read the newspaper. But after you read the newspaper, you just throw it out because it's worthless anymore, And so, like, all these novels and everything just titillate the senses, and they don't have any lasting value and can't purify your mind or heart. And so they compare this literature is like for swans. There's two types of birds. Prabhupada said there's the crows and the swans, and birds of a feather flock together.
Okay.
So the crow is like, it likes to eat garbage. And Prabhupada used to say that if somebody spits out the window in India, a crow will fly down and catch the gob. And but the swans like to, they always congregate in beautiful crystal clear lakes filled with lotus flowers. And they have the ability, actually the swan can take the essence of something, like if there's a mixture of milk and water, somehow the swan has the ability to suck out the milk and leave the water.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
It's like a mystic power or something, I don't know how to do it, but that's what that I've heard from these literatures. But the swan is a very, mode of goodness type of creature, but and this literature, all the other literature like romance novels and stuff like that, that's compared to the garbage.
That reminds me, because the one thing I was watching on Prabhupada was what he was saying, that there are two worlds. One is the material world and the other one is the spiritual world.
Right.
So that makes sense. If the crow, I guess, would be more indicative of the material world, with the swan being the spiritual world, I guess.
Yeah. Well, swans, well, the material, he was just talking about that, this earth is actually only a fragment. They compare all the universes and the material world. It's only 1/4 of the creation of God. There's millions of universes. And each universe is like, when Mahavishnu, who is like a portion of Vishnu, he exhales, and all of the universes come out of the pores of his body, and they last for 1 day of Brahma. There's different sizes. Our universe is pretty small. We only have a 4-headed Brahma, and then when he lives for 311 trillion years with a T.
Wow.
And that's how long this universe, the universes are created and destroyed like for 8 billion years or something like that is the life of of a particular universe, but then it's like a partial destruction and creation. And Carl Sagan, the famous American physicist,
very familiar.
He didn't buy, and neither did Emerson, buy the Christian theology like that the universe is only 6,000 years old or 9,000.
Complete bunk,
because they dude in the Bible figured out the genealogy of Adam and Eve, since because they list that in the Bible, who was born of this person, that person. They figured 5,000 to 6,000 years old. But you take one look at the Grand Canyon, and that wasn't carved out in 6,000 years.
Absolutely right.
And Emerson didn't like that, and neither did Carl Sagan. And he said that the Vedas, with the creation and destruction of the universe revolving in cycles of billions of years, is much more in tune with the scientific version of the cosmos.
Yeah.
So he kind of plugged the Vedas in that way,
Yeah, absolutely.
So
called the cosmos.
Yeah. So, but the material world is like a bag of mustard seeds. All these universes are like mustard seeds, and there's a big bag of them. And that's only 1/4 of the creation. The rest of the creation is the spiritual world, where people live forever. They don't have any birth or death. And they're actually full of knowledge and bliss, whereas our bodies, more than I do, are temporary and miserable.
Sure, absolutely.
Full of ignorance.
Full of ignorance too, yeah.
And so, but the spiritual world is characterized by being full of knowledge and bliss, eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. They never die. And birth, death, old age, and disease are conspicuous by its absence.
Okay.
So that is the spiritual world. And that's our actual original home. we're only here because we wanted to enjoy separately and set up our own crib. But,
Mhm.
it's kind of like a school of hard knocks, because this material world is designed in such a way that it's temporary and miserable. Lord Krishna even says, Dukhaliyam ashashvatam. It's as temporary and miserable, and there's no happiness. You know that there's a singer-songwriter called Melanie. She just died today.
Yeah.
And I used to listen to her in the 70s when I was a kid, when she was big, and she had this song called Psychotherapy, and it goes, mine eyes have seen the glories of the teachings of Freud, and like in that tune, but then he says, glory, glory, psychotherapy, glory, glory, sexuality. He said, you might think you're having fun, but you're not having fun at all. I love that line even back then, because that is actually our philosophy. People are trying to enjoy their senses in the material world, but it's going to create more misery in the long run, unless you transcend your attachment to your bodily, their bodily, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending is simply animal propensities. And everybody likes to get drunk, and everybody likes to titillate their senses with sex or drugs, rock and roll, and it's just not. It's not gonna satisfy the soul. The soul needs something more, and so we have to have this kind of literature, which will actually purify our soul and make us eligible to graduate this in this temporary, miserable material world, and get a spiritual body. I mean, you can rotate in this material world in the repeated birth and death. That's called samsara. But you can actually go to the material world and, get a spiritual body. It's like an apartment, in this material world, there's different apartments you can buy. If you can afford a better body, like a demigod body, that they live for a long time, they have a much better standard of enjoyment. Then you might get a demigod body. Or if you like to eat too much, you might get a body of a pig. So you can go down or up. It just depends on your proclivities. Whatever you do in this life is determining your next life. But you can get the whole cycle of birth and death. The cycle of birth and death is miserable, because you have to lose all your friends and family, and and you have to take birth, and when you die and take birth again, nobody can know. You don't remember. Most of the time you don't remember. Like usually when some people do remember their last life, like little kids when they're about 4, it's been documented.
Absolutely. Yes.
That they've remembered their past life. But it's very rare. And mostly you just forget it. And then you have to take birth again. And you lose all the knowledge you ever made, But when in this process, the process of Krishna consciousness, like an eternal bank account, whatever you do in this life for Krishna is in your bank account, and if you start and become 1% Krishna conscious in this life, you start off in your next life at 2%.
Oh, okay. Now, is that by design that we don't remember the past lives? Is that intentional?
That's not intentional. It just happens sometimes. Like there's this little kid one time in India.
Yes.
She was carrying around a little piece of wood that was wrapped in a blanket.
Okay.
And she kept calling the little piece of wood Meena, like it was her baby or something.
Oh,
and her parent, she was only like 3 or 4. And she asked her parents, she wanted to go to the village down the road. And her parents took her there. And she pointed out all her family members and her daughter named Meena.
Wow.
And that's creepy.
That is. Yeah, that's crazy.
And like also out of the body experiences, like one time in, that's also been documented scientifically.
Yeah.
That one guy was in the hospital, and he was brain dead. He had 0 EKG, no pulse, and he was watching from above what the surgeons were doing. And, they had taken his dentures out, and he actually came back to life. His soul entered his body and he got revived, and he was asking where his dentures were. And he had seen the nurse put it in the drawer. He said, you put my dentures in the drawer, go get them. And so they were there.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, I mean that is like mind blowing, you know.
It is.
And there's no way he could have understood that unless he was actually out of his body and watching the whole thing. And that's
Yeah,
been documented.
my uncle actually had an out of body experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, man.
So anyway, these are the symptoms of this is the I think I'm just going to read the rest of this unless you have any questions. Do you have any questions?
No, you answered all the ones I had, so thank you.
Okay, there are thousands and thousands of literary men all over the world. They've created many, many thousands of literary works for the information of people in general for thousands and thousands of years. Unfortunately, none of them have brought peace and tranquility on the earth. This is due to a spiritual vacuum in these literatures. Therefore, the Vedic literature, especially Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, are especially recommended to suffering humanity to bring about the desired effect of liberation from the pangs of material civilization, which is eating the vital part of human energy. I'm just going to stop here, but I wanted to send you something, you know, because
Sure.
of the, you know, our Kirtan Center here are like, we have programs every once in a while. You've been to one,
Yeah,
coexist, right?
sure.
And right when the war broke out, you know, in Israel,
Yes.
it would be a good thing to make a narrative slideshow video of Prabhupada actually wrote something back in the early part of 1966 called the Peace Formula. It's based on the Bhagavad Gita, but I'll send you that. And it's kind of like relevant to the today's situation. We're going to run out of time here, but thank you for attending.